Hello, everyone.
Hello.
There we go. All right. Welcome back. Let's see. Share my screen. Okay. Okay. All right. Participant enable. Okay. Let's...
Professor,
Yes.
can I take CSS quiz after class today?
Sure. Yeah. Say after during office hours we can chat.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Let's see. Where are we? This we can put it here. I can bring the chat. All right. So let's take a look at the syllabus and see where we are. Can everybody see the syllabus?
Yes.
Yes. I'm sorry. Was that a yes?
We can see the document.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, great, excellent. All right, so let's see. Right, so yeah, we are starting week number 5, and so we're going to be talking about JavaScript this week. Up to this point, the websites that we've been building have been mostly static. We lay out the content using HTML. We use CSS so that we can style it and make it look a little prettier. And we use Bootstrap and Font Awesome to make them professional and use iconography. But up to this point, it has been fairly static, right? The only dynamism that we've seen so far is for the application reacting to the size of the screen, right? So that and we call that responsiveness, right? And we declare using responsive design that certain columns should be of a certain width, for certain ranges of the screen. But that's as far as we've been able to do. We also done a little bit of content appearing or disappearing, again, depending on the size of the screen, by changing their styling to be, display, none, or display block, or inline. But mostly the content is you declare its behavior, and then that's what it does. We've done some animation, right, with CSS, some rotations and things like that. But what we want to be able to introduce now is a programmatic language such as JavaScript that's going to allow us to take full control of the behavior of the screen. What we would like to be able to do is, as folks they type or they move the mouse, or they can we can have the application react to that and maybe fetch data from a remote server, and then dynamically render the screen based on that data and based on the behaviors that as the user interacts. So definitely we want to have something much more advanced than just some kind of declarative behavior. We want to have programmatic behavior. So that's where JavaScript comes in. It's the basis of all programming in web applications. Mostly has been most famous in when you apply JavaScript running on a browser, but it has since grown beyond the browser. So today we can see JavaScript finding its way to the desktop, with using Node.js, and used for implementing middle tier application using servers and things like that. So yeah, we'll get to that a little later. But today we're going to learn about JavaScript running on the browser. Okay. Let's see. This here. Anyway, so that's the plan for this week. We're going to introduce Q assignment 5 this week, and which is going to be all about JavaScript. It doesn't look like we have a quiz this week. Okay, so yeah, so we're gonna have an easier week this week. No quiz on Friday on Thursday. So but there will be one later next week. All right. All right. Any questions before we get started? All right. So let's get going. Let's see. Yeah. So this is the content for week 5. Let's talk about a little bit about JavaScript. Let's bring that up. A couple slides first. Okay. All right. Can everybody see the JavaScript slides?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So JavaScript, the actual official name is ECMAScript, right? But it has popularly been referred to as JavaScript from way in the beginning. What it tried to do is way at the beginning when the browsers had just come out, Netscape and Mozilla and all these, soon after it exploded, right, in the early 90s, when Tim Berners-Lee started coming up with this HTML, HTTP, and the first browser and the first server. Folks started to looking for ways that they could make these applications more dynamic, right? It used to be all this content was static, mostly for rendering, research papers that doctors and researchers wanted to share information with their colleagues. And so, but we wanted to add some logic, so that, for instance, you might want to be able to have the website, be able to render different things throughout the day, right? For instance, if it's a weather application, you might want to show different images depending on whether it's raining or it's shining, right? And so instead of having the same page render the same thing over the day, you would like to be able to have some logic, depending on the temperature, depending on the humidity and whatnot. You want to render different things on the screen. We also wanted to be able to do some simple validation, as folks, typed and filled out some forms. We wanted to make sure that if we were asking for a numeric value, we could, make sure that indeed it was a numeric value. We want to do, instead of grabbing that information and sending it over to the server for processing, we wanted to do some validation before sending it out to the server, right? So that we can let folks know that that email is wrong, or that phone number is wrong, or whatever, right? So JavaScript allowed us to embed logic inside of the HTML document, and react to user interface, user events, such as keystrokes on the keyboard, or moving the mouse, or filling out some form information, right? So yeah, and today is obviously has grown much more than that. Today, we have very very powerful libraries that take full control of the web page, right? The way that JavaScript controls or interacts with the browser is by manipulating the DOM, right? The document object model, right? If you remember, the DOM is a object representation of the graphical rendering of the screen, right? So that every letter, every word, everything has a rectangle that falls and renders on the screen, and that has a representation in the DOM. And so JavaScript can manipulate the DOM, right? It can remove nodes from the DOM, and then poof, it's gone from the screen. Or it can add nodes into the DOM, and then it renders on the screen, right? So we're going to be learning how is it that using JavaScript we can interact with the DOM so that we can make these pages dynamic. Okay. So anyway, so the way that JavaScript can be embedded in HTML is by making use of the script tag, right? There it is, so script. And then inside of that script tag, there's an opening and closing tag. And then in there, you can put a JavaScript code, right? And obviously it's unlike HTML where you have tags and opening tags and closing tags and attributes. Instead, here you have full-blown functions, classes, objects, and arrays and variables and everything you would expect in a full-blown programming language. Okay, so I'm going to open up my IntelliJ, and so that we can add some code and play around with some of what the examples that we're going to be seeing here. Okay, let me close this. All right, so for instance, let's so this is 5, right? So this is week 5, so this will be for assignment number 5. And let's put here the lecture. So for the lecture, right, we're going to be coding a couple things here. So let's create here an index page. So we'll say index. Right, and so we're going to be talking about JavaScript today. There we go. Okay, and we'll say we'll have a H1 that has JavaScript, and we'll do we'll play around with a couple things here. So let's see if we can run this. There it is. So we have our JavaScript screen, and so let's just play around with some of this. Okay. All right. So what's JavaScript? It's just plain old HTML of where you can embed code in there. All right. So let's copy some of this script and let's put it in there. There it is. And then let's refresh the screen. If I refresh it, notice what happened here. Notice that this alert just came up and says hello world, right? And we can say okay, and then we can dismiss it. So in the code basically is we're using a function called alert, and just like the name suggests, right? It pops up an alert box with a string that you have in there, right? Very good. So that's the simplest useless JavaScript program that you can think of, right? Just saying a simple alert. All right. Now we can also display content not only with alert, but we can also write to what we refer to as the console, right? If you remember, every page, right, in the browser, you can inspect. If you right click it and you open up the inspector, right, we'll make it here, put it on the right hand side. Okay, this is a tool that developers can use to debug a page or style it and try to see how a particular style looks, right, live, right? You can manipulate the document live, and we've been spending most of our time here in this tab over here. See elements, right? And in here you can look at the DOM, right? This is a representation of the DOM of what the browser parsed, right? And then it renders it here for you and you can just highlight, right, hover over the things, and then it highlights on the left hand side what rectangle refers to what part on the DOM. Yes. And then you have this script here, right, that really has no representation on the DOM. See that? It is part of the DOM, right? But it doesn't have any representation on the window. Okay. But we can also print out to the console. If you notice the console, this is just like you would in other languages, using print ln or system.out.something, and you can send text to that console. Well, so we can do the same thing here using JavaScript on the browser, right? So for instance, instead of alert, we can say maybe console log. Okay, if I refresh the screen, right, notice that it doesn't print. Wait, what? Errors, messages. Oh, there it is. There we go. They failed to load, blah, 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 Chrome extension. Okay, that's something else. No errors, warnings, info, messages. Yeah, there's my hello world, right? My hello world is printed right here, and it tells me where it was displayed. It was displayed from the index. Okay. All right. One user. Oh, there we go. Let's open up the one user. There it is. Hello, and where was displayed here. Okay, we can make it a little bigger so we can see what's going on here. Okay. Yeah, this is useful for debugging, right? That you can see the values of variables, right? You can just print it out to the console. Although that's a lazy way of debugging, we'll show you much better ways of debugging where you can put actually breakpoints, and you can step through these scripts, because these scripts can get fairly complex, right? Depending on the complexity, sophistication of your screen, right? So you want to definitely be able to debug it. Some other ways of writing or displaying something is that we can write to the actual DOM, right? Right now we have the DOM here, right? We have H1, and that the way we added H1 to the DOM was by literally adding a text here on the HTML. But we can do it also programmatically, right? Instead of doing manually here, we can have a program do that for us. Okay. So what we could do here is that we could use document. So document is a global object, right? It's a global object that represents this object right here. See this object, right? You can access any part of this document, right, of this DOM here, right, through the use of this global variable, right? So this global variable is this object right there. You can ask for the head, for the body, for the H1. You can ask for any attributes in there, and you can manipulate it, right? You can retrieve things or add things or change any attributes in there, okay, through this global variable. So one of the simplest ways to add content is to use the function write, right? You can write to the DOM, right? So this is our hello world, and so we can save that and rerun this, and there it is, hello world. See that? Notice the string. This string was added, right, by this script over here, right? And you can generate actual HTML in here. You can say you can put maybe an H1 on H2, right? And this would be fully valid HTML, right? So if I run that, notice that it becomes H2. See that? It's a full-blown H2 node, right? That has been dynamically generated by documents, and this could be as sophisticated as you want, right? Right now it's just a simple string, a simple H2. So we're going to be generating lots and lots of this HTML dynamically through the use of these types of functions. Okay, so whenever you want to have lots and lots of big long strings, the single quotes or the double quotes is not very useful, right? There is a different type of string that allows you to break up long, sophisticated HTML strings, right, into multiple lines, right? And so instead of the single quotes or the double quotes, we're going to be using a lot the backtick. See that? Right, the backtick all by themselves, right? Just behave just like regular quotes, okay? But has the advantage that you can break this up into multiple lines, something like that, right? And in here you can have full-blown HTML, right? You can have UL, right, and oops, like that, right? And then in here you can have LI, pick up the kids, right? And buy milk, whatever, right? Okay, if I render, oops, if I render, notice that I get the UL and the line items that I would expect, right? Now, what you might ask, well, why don't you just plain old copy this and put it, hard coded in there? Obviously, right? The difference, right, that if you do it this way, it's hard coded, right? It's there, you manually typed it, as opposed to this string. I could calculate that string, right? I can dynamically make that string as big, as complex as I want, depending on my algorithms, right? My algorithm could have generated this LI as a for loop, right? That reads some records that it fetches from the internet, from some query that went from SQL, and then I iterate over that array, and as I iterate, I can generate this line item dynamically as complex as I want, right? So that's definitely one great thing, that I can I can calculate and be as sophisticated as I want. And the other one is that now it allows me to add all the great techniques that we have learned about software engineering, right? That now a big complex application or website, I can break it up into multiple modules, right? That I can are follow a design pattern of maybe it's written in the top-down design where you have a big components that it's that's written in terms of smaller components that themselves are written in smaller components, right? And they're reusable, they're self-contained, and they use all the great best practices of software engineering, right? Which I couldn't do in HTML. I can break up this page into smaller pieces, snippets, right? That I can then put together and build something fairly complex. Okay, so yeah, so that's where we're going. We're going to be using JavaScript for creating these modules, creating these components that can be used to break up complex websites into smaller components, and obviously being able to use algorithms to generate these things that are connected or in interface with databases and servers and whatnot. Okay, great. That's where we're going. All right, so let's see what else we have here. And we can also have we not only can we generate content dynamically into the DOM, we can also read and see what's already there or modify it, right? So for instance, if we have a JavaScript here and I have a an ID here, right? And the ID might be hello. Okay, I can programmatically grab that content, which right now, just says JavaScript. Or I can programmatically, right, within my script, I can retrieve it. I can say document, document dot get element by ID, right? Remember, the document variable gives you access to the DOM, right? It allows you to retrieve any element in there, delete it, add it, modify it. And for instance, I can retrieve elements that are already there with their IDs. See, this ID says hello. Well, I can retrieve it. I can say, well, use this hello as the ID, retrieve it, right? And then maybe store it in a local variable. Right? I can say, var h1 or h1 hello. Okay. Once I have a reference, now I have a reference. I have a reference to this element right here, right? And I can do all sorts of things. I can remove it, right? Maybe I can change its content, right? So for instance, I can grab that now, and I can say dot. I can change the inner HTML or inner text, meaning I can replace the text that's in there from JavaScript to hello world or something else. Let's see, what do I have here? Oh yeah, hello world, I guess, right? So hello world again. So now I'm going to have two hello worlds. Replace, and that didn't work. What happened? Console errors. Okay, hello world inner text is not a function. Did I misspell it? Oh, equal. Sorry. There we go. There we go. So now our H1 also says hello world, right? So this one has been modified from what it was, JavaScript, whereas this one was dynamically generated and written to the document. Okay. Yeah. So let's see what else. Let's see. Yeah. So we can use the function get element by ID to retrieve the elements by their ID. There's also, you can retrieve by class, you can retrieve by a CSS, you can give it a CSS a rule, a selector, right? And it will traverse the DOM looking for those elements that meet the CSS criteria. Remember, CSS is a language that allows us to refer to different portions of the document and then apply certain stylings, right? Well, we can use the same idea here. So provide CSS, but to retrieve a reference to these DOM and then programmatically remove it or change its content or clone it or whatever we want. Okay. Yeah, so there it is. So get element by ID. That's the example that we just saw. Once we have the elements, you can do all sorts of things. Not only can you change the inner HTML, the text that it's inside, but it also has other attributes such as style, right? So any of the CSS styling that are associated to each node, right, are available through the style, right? Just like in HTML, you would use the style attribute, and you would provide a CSS string in there to change the background color, the foreground color, the font, and whatnot. Well, you could do that programmatically instead of doing it declaratively through HTML, right? And declaratively, you can say, well, style, right, is that the background color is, it's green, whatever, right? So that if you render that, right, it's green. There it is, right? But I can do that programmatically too. I can, once I have the h1 hello here, right? Actually, a better naming, we're not going to use that naming convention. We're going to use a camel case naming convention, which is much better. I can change the style programmatically. There's hello, right? I can grab a hold of its style attribute, right? Which is this is doing it declaratively. I am declaring that the h1 color is this green, but here I can do it programmatically. I can say that the foreground color, right, is white. Okay, and let's use single quotes, right? And there it is, right? I can programmatically change that, and as opposed to statically declaring it, right? This would allow me to, for instance, as I interact with the application and I click here, I drag, and I can have an application that as I click, right, changes the colors of things or whatever, right? But I can programmatically make those changes, okay? Or I can change the font size. I can change the borders or the justification. I can change everything, right? Or I can change the display, right? So I can hide things or show them, right? So if I change the style, the display, right, and I say none, then I am just saying that it's still in the DOM. I'm just don't want to display it, right? So if I render, notice the hello world is there, but if I refresh, notice it's gone, right? It's still in the DOM. There it is. There's H1, but it's not displaying because its display is none. See that? I can change it here in the browser, right? And notice that it's there, right? I can change it and toggle it. But that none was dynamically generated or added or set programmatically using JavaScript. Okay. Yeah, very, very powerful. We can have a JavaScript, like any respectable language, has full control of and use of many data types. One of them being the date, right? So for instance, let's declare here a date today. And we can write the month. Right? You can say document write the month. If we run that, there is a month 9, right? Actually, let me put this a little higher, maybe at the beginning, so that there it is, the month, right? The month 9. And today is a variable that was generated as a new instance of a date class, and it has different methods that you can retrieve the month. You can get the full year. You can get the date, right? So there it is. So it's month 9. Actually, that's base. It's not month 9. That means October, right? Because it's based on 0. So January is 0, February is 1, and so on and so forth. So 9 is really October. 2021. That's the year 2021. That's the full year, right? And today is the 5th. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So full control of dates. You have arrays, right? So for instance, let's declare an array, right? And then you can calculate and render the scores, right? So if we render that, there it is. It renders as a comma separated strings, right? So there's our variables. To declare a variable, we use the var. Although in a minute I'll say not to use vars. What's the main advantage of using? Yeah, so we'll come back to that in a minute, but yeah, so we are going to be using lots of the backticks, right? And backticks, one of the main advantages is that it allows you to break up long strings into multiple lines, just like this, right? Instead, if you use single quotes or double quotes, you would have to concatenate them, right? You have one line plus another line plus another line, and it's just very, very cumbersome, right? So you would have a lot of double quotes everywhere, right? It's very hard to work. Another advantage is that it's very easy to embed other things in using backticks, like variables, right? You can declare a variable, this score here, right? And you can create it here. We could say li, right? And you can embed that expression right there, right? Scores. You can embed other things. So for instance, if we go down, notice that, yeah, we were able to add that array as part of the li just by embedding it as an expression, right? Very, very powerful. As opposed to if you're using single quotes and double quotes, again, you would have to use the plus sign, to concatenate strings. It's just very, very messy to use in single quotes and double quotes. Yeah, backticks is really the way to go. All right, although you'll see me use here and there for different things. Okay. Let's see what else. Yeah, so we get let's look at another example of using these scores, right? Where we're going to calculate an average, right? Let's calculate an average once we have the scores, right? So we're declaring a variable total. We're iterating over them, just accumulating the entire total, right? And then calculating the average. And then we can just print out the average. We can say document total, right? We can write the total is whatever, and then the average, right? So let's do that. And there it is, right? So we have the total is 324 and the average is 81. Okay. Yeah, things that you would expect yeah, see over here, we're using double quotes to do this. A much neater way of doing this, using the new style, right, is that you would instead, right, instead of doing this, you would do something like this, right? Let me just copy this and let me show you. So instead of doing this, we can rewrite it using backticks. So let me do a backtick right there. Okay. And let me remove the old double quotes. All right. And so instead of these pluses and closing the quotes and adding, right, you can instead do the following. Right. And just use this curly brackets like that. Okay, now this is much easier to read than this one, right? Because in this one, you're adding all these pluses and double quotes, blah, 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 and it's just messy. Same thing over here, right? We can change this to backticks and remove the double quotes and the pluses, right? And make this so much easier to read. I would put this instead of curly brackets and a $sign. Right, and I'm just gonna add a BR, another BR in front of it so that it breaks the line. There it is, right? Notice that it does the same thing, but it's much easier to read. All right, excellent. Yeah, we'll see more of that in a minute. You can, here's an example of creating dynamic lists, right? So for instance, let's, once we have these scores, right, we can create a line item, a list that we're dynamically writing and creating a UL, opening a UL, and then appending, right, and writing multiple times a line item and then the score, right, and then printing out the score here. Let me put this maybe in a single line, and there's my closing LI and then my closing UL. Okay, so if we run that, indeed there it is, right? My array, my UL, dynamic ULs that we put there, right? Maybe we should put this up here so that, there we go. So you see the scores, right? And then the array. Now, obviously, we can make this a little prettier. Again, using the backticks. So, for instance, a more modern way of doing this, which we'll see in a minute, is as follows, right? For instance, you can say the following, right? You can say document, right, and then write, okay, open backticks, and do everything inside of the backticks. Right? Let me show you. Right? You would open your UL, close it, okay, and then in here you want the for loop, right, to iterate over the LIs here, right? And so what we're going to do is use a function called map. Map, basically what allows you to do is iterate over an array, which is what we're going to do. That's what this for loop is doing, right? It's iterating over an array. But every time it iterates over the array, it allows us to calculate something with each one of the elements. What are we calculating each time? We're calculating this string, yes? And everything that that function returns, every time the map for each one of them is going to accumulate, and it's going to concatenate, right? All the results of using that function. So we'll see. We can do the following. We can say we're going to embed in here the following. We are going to, so it's kind of allows you to go back and forth between HTML, back to JavaScript, back to HTML, back to JavaScript, right? So we're going to take the scores, right? We're going to map, right? And so for each score, we're going to generate the following output. We're going to generate the LI, right? We close the LI. That contains what? It contains the scores, right? Scores, sub, we need an index, right? We can ask for an index right here. We can say, give me an index. So this is going to be an index, right? It's going to be equal, and then the scores, the actual value, the scores, like that. And that's an expression too. There we go. All right. So yeah, so let's run that. And oh, we need to all this map generates a long string with comma separated strings, right? So we need to just join this into a, not using anything. There it is. So two ways of rendering the same thing. One using the old style, right? This is using the old legacy ES5, we call it, right? The old style. And this is the more modern way of doing the same thing, where you can embed inside of HTML, basically, JavaScript inside of HTML and whatnot, right? Using these ways of these escape sequences, right? So that you can say, well, I'm in HTML now, I'm in JavaScript, I'm back in HTML and back in JavaScript. And anyway, so this will become very, very common to do this, right? Later on, when we introduce React next week, right? And it'll become even simpler to read, right? And we'll see that it'll become much more clearer. Okay. All right, two ways of doing the same thing. Let's see, what else? Let's go back. Here is we're creating a dynamic table, right, with the scores, right? So if we copy that, and we can just display that. So there's a table. So we're generating a string. So notice that in this case, what we were doing is that we were writing to the document for every loop. Okay, we're writing to the loop for HLI, as opposed to this one is actually calculating the string first, right? It starts off with an opening table. It's going to concatenate each row. It's going to generate a new row, right? It's going to put the scores and blah, 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 right? It's going to concatenate each column, because it has to not only generate the rows, but then has to generate the columns, right, in the table. So it's concatenating every time. So you have a lot of concatenations, and at the end, you concatenate the table, and then finally you write the table, right? So let's see what that looks like. If I go here and render it, there is wait a minute. Is that what we're generating? Let's make a border here because I can't see the table. Border equal 1. There's our table, right? We have the each one of the array elements, right, and the actual values, right? Again, a much cleaner way of implementing this would be, again, using the new style. So we can take a look at it real quick. We can say document, document.write, okay, open ticks. And here you just have table, table, again, border 1. Okay, and we're going to close the table. Oops. All right, and then we want to iterate over each one of the scores. So basically, we use the same technique that we just saw earlier, which is basically the map, right? So let's do that. So we're going to open and close as an expression and as an inner expression. There it is. What are we doing? We're going to loop through each one of the scores. So it would be scores, that map, and we have the score. Probably we need the index, right? And we're going to generate the following. We're going to generate a row. We're going to generate a row. We need the we're going to generate a new string. We're going to generate a new string, which is going to be a row, table row. We're going to close the table row, and we're going to have a couple of columns, right? Here's the first column, and then another column. And the first column is going to say what? It's going to say scores, right? Scores, so scores, a sub index. So we can embed the index here, IDX, right? And here the actual value, the score. Like that. Notice how much cleaner, right, this is to, doing all these concatenations and open quotes and closing the quotes and the plus equal, right? This is the old way of doing it, right? I put several lines into one line here, but the number of concatenations is each one, right? Where you first add the row, then you concatenate the TD, and then you can concatenate the data. You close the TD, and then you concatenate the column, and so on and so forth, right? So this is very, very error prone. It's very easy to make a mistake here, right? Whereas this, it's much easier to read. You understand that you open and close the table, that you're iterating over the data structure, right? And that for each item, right, you're generating another string, right? Of which some of them embed some expressions of the index or the score. And let's see if it's indeed generates the same thing. There it is, right? So here's my first table, and it's my second table, generates the same exact thing. This is definitely easier to read, right? So we're gonna be mostly using this new syntax, right? Which is the new ECMAScript 16, right? ECMA 2015. Yeah, it came out in 2015. It's referred to as ES6, right? And it's the most common syntax that it's used today and supported by most browsers. Okay. Yeah, all this is running in your browser, right? What does join do? Oh yeah, I forgot join. Yeah, so there should be a join here. My browser's being nice to me and ignoring the fact that all these strings are adding a comma. So it's a string, comma, string, comma, string, comma. Right? Actually, you can see it here. Where's the border? Okay, here's my table. Here's a table that we generated first. Here's my second table. Okay, yeah, the browser is nice and it's ignoring. So every time what map does is that it returns an array of strings, right? And that's rendered. We saw before that if you try to render an array, it renders as commas. Oh, there we go. See all these commas that are just lingering in there? those are the commas that the browser didn't know what to do with them, right? So what join is going to do is going to say, okay, well, take all that big array with multiple strings and just concatenate them, all of them, right? Just join them all as in one big string, right? And what I want you to do with those commas, I want you to separate. I want you to just replace them with empty strings, right? So it's replacing the commas, just blowing them away, right? So we don't have the extra commas. So if I refresh, notice that the extra commas are gone, right? Yeah. Yep. Yeah, join. When we come back next week and use React JS, we won't need to do any of this join, right? It's done for you behind the scenes. All this is auto, like magic. Okay. All right, let's keep going. You can also work with events, right? That you can handle. You can have the browser define a whole bunch of buttons and define all sorts of user interfaces, controls that if you click on it, the browser can then respond. So for instance, we can create a button, right? And so let's add a button there. And what this button says, obviously says hello, right? That if we render it, there it is. It says say hello, but it's not doing anything really, right? It's we are associating an event handler saying if there is a click, right? If there's an on click, then I want you to call this function say hello, right? Which right now there's no function called say hello. We can define it as part of the script. We can say function say hello. Oops, say hello. And I would say that maybe we could do alert hello. Okay. So if we refresh and we click on say hello, the alert pops up. Okay. So obviously we can make things be so much more interesting. We can do all sorts of things, right? We can have it hide something or show something or calculate something, and then or add more scores, maybe add more elements to an array, right? And then maybe re-render the table, things like that. Okay. Yeah, so let's see. So there's our hello world. Now in general, these scripts should in general always live in the head right here. That is syntactically the correct thing to do, right? To put these scripts in the head, right? Not as part of the body, right? Now the problem here is that we have a whole bunch of document.write, right? That wants to add elements to the DOM, and if you put it in the head, right, they're not going to end up in the body. All right. Now our browser might be forgiving enough that it ends up actually writing it to the body like it did here, right? But you have less control. So we'll see how we actually do that, right? So anyway, but the correct syntactical place to put a string, the script, is inside the head. Also, a good practice is that you don't write any of this code embedded in the HTML, right? So notice that we've written all this code inside of the HTML document, right? That's a bad practice. Instead, what we should do is declare a separate file, right? JavaScript and index.js, and in there, right? And in there, we're going to take all that code, grab all that code, and let's see, we're going to grab all that, right? And we're going to put it in our brand new index.js. See that? So it lives outside, right? And then we can just bring it in. We can say script, we can say source, right? And we can bring index.js. There it is. See that? You do always need the opening and closing of the script tag, right? So if we re-render this, right, there it is, right? It works just the same. Okay. Cheng, did you have a question? Oh, okay. Reference to the join documentation. Thank you. Yeah, so yeah, it's a good practice to have all your code in a separate file, not embedded inside of the script, right? Where did the button go? Oh yeah, no, there it is, right? Isn't it there? Oh, where did it go? Oh, there it is. Say hello. It's way at the bottom, right? Because what happens is that the script runs first, right? It runs first before it ever gets to the body, right? So it starts writing to the body even before the parser, the browser gets to read the H1, right? So by the time it gets to the button, right, the index has already added and written a whole bunch of stuff to the document, right? So yeah, so that's another feature of JavaScript files is that they run immediately, right? So they don't wait, and if they have any variables, any functions that they declare, they're declared in global space, right? So that's a feature and also a problem that we'll see how to handle that. Right. So how do we solve that when you want to access, when you want things to run? Well, even though it's the syntactically scripts must be declared in the head, you'll see that in development it's very, very common in industry, right? And even a best practice not to have it in the head, right? To instead have it way at the bottom. Okay. And the reason for this is that sometimes these scripts are very, very big, right? And you might be loading all sorts of libraries, jQuery and React.js and Lodash and Redux and all these other libraries, and they themselves might be fairly big, lots of kilobytes that need to be downloaded, and they will be executed, right? And so if you put them here in the head, right? None of the other content will be downloaded until those scripts get downloaded first, right? And then once and they have to execute, right? So it can slow down the rendering of your page, right? And in these day and ages where folks are are not willing to wait for the page to render and whatnot, it's actually a better practice to maybe not all the scripts, but especially scripts that are long or scripts that have to modify the DOM, right? To put them way down at the bottom, the very last thing, the very bottom of the body, after all the content has been pumped to the browser, right? We want to pump as much content to the browser as fast as possible, right, to render images and do some marketing and entice our users to stay in the website, right? If we take half a second too long, folks are just going to lose patience and go away, right? So it's actually a best practice to especially long scripts and libraries, right, to load them at the bottom, okay, even though it's syntactically incorrect, right? And but the browser understands that you can indeed have that there as well. Okay. All right. So we can have let's keep going. We can do some simple math as well with JavaScript, right, as you would expect. Let me put some here, maybe put some simple math, right? And so if we render this, we have simple math way at the top, right? There it is. Let me make this a little smaller. There we go. So this, oh, and we have a button. Let's maybe put a break there. All right, and maybe, I don't know, some HR, just to put some space. There we go. Yeah, so we're declaring here a span, meaning this is something that's going to flow with the content, right? It doesn't add any vertical spacing. It's just in line with whatever the content. We are giving it an ID, right? Result, and we can using our index.js, right? We can grab the ID, using this ID. We can say grab it. We can say, do I have it already? Yeah, there it is. So I'm just going to copy it. Right. So if we paste that in there, this is going to retrieve the field by its ID. Right. It's going to grab the result. and then it's going to replace the content, which right now it's empty. Right, the result is empty. Right, notice that 2 plus 3, it's not showing the result. But we're going to dynamically fill in or inject the content and change its inner content and change it to be whatever 2 plus 3 is, right? So if we refresh, notice that it becomes 5. Right? So we have dynamically, right, retrieve the element and then change its inner HTML. Now, if it's text, just plain text, then you can just say inner text. But if you know that you're going to put in there actual HTML, maybe an embedded UL or a button or whatever, right? Then you could use inner HTML. Yeah. So when you know it's little text, then you should use inner text, right? If you know it's HTML that needs to be parsed as HTML in the DOM, then you should put HTML, inner HTML. Let's see what else. You can also retrieve data from input fields. So for instance, if you have an input field, right? So like an input field like that, and let's do a break here, and which might have an initial value of 1, 2, 3, right? That's what we have here. You can retrieve it. You can retrieve the value and then maybe alert the box, right? So for instance, you can at the top, you have the I might need to do it in the order. Let's see. Yeah, we're grabbing that element whose ID is A, right? The ID is A. There it is, right? So we're retrieving that. And once we have that, we can retrieve its value of the input field, right? And then just alert the box to 1, 2, 3. So for instance, if we refresh, it says alert 1, 2, 3. See that? So we are reading that input field 1, 2, 3 and just displaying it. Okay. We can make maybe 2 input fields, right? They have a couple of values, and then have a button that when it runs, right, when we click on it, it's going to call a function a plus b, right? And then we can declare that function to take the value of c and then put the actual value of whatever a and b is, right? So kind of like a mini calculator, right? So let's do that. Let's copy that into here, right? Although we already have some a, right? So let's let's take that. And we have a function here that's going to take the value of a, the value of b, right? And then going to update the value of c, right? So if we refresh that, oops, we refresh there. There it is, right? We have these 2 input fields that we don't have any values for now, but we're going to click on add. We're going to update the value of c, which is a span over here, right? So let's do that. So let's make this a little smaller. There it is. And maybe do an HR here. And let's stop with that alert. Where is that alert? Yeah, that alert. Let's comment that out. All right, so that function, the function is called add a plus b. So we call, let's declare the function. So function, and it's going to grab the value of a, right? Grab the value of a. It's going to grab the value of b. Okay. B. Maybe dot value. Okay. It's going to calculate. It's going to grab the input field c, or this span. Right, so just grab c. So here's c. Okay. Is going to calculate the sum. Right, the sum is going to be a plus b, right? And we're going to set the inner text of c. And say c dot inner text, right, is going to be the sum. Okay. All right, let's try it out. I'm going to refresh. It's going to have 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 4. Add. Okay, notice what happens here. See that? So it literally took the 1, 2, 3 as a string and it concatenated with 2, 3, 4, so it came out with a longer string. That's not what we meant, right? So this dot value, it's always going to retrieve the string representation of whatever's in that input field. Same thing with B, right? And then we calculate the sum. This plus here, because these are two strings, is going to concatenate the strings, not do arithmetic addition. Is going to do string concatenation, right? And then we're setting the inner text, right, of those two strings. What we really meant is that this needs to be converted into integers, right? And so we can say A, we can convert it into a parse integer. We're going to parse an integer A, right? We're going to store it in the same variable A. We're going to do the same thing with B. So B is going to be parse int of B, like that. Notice that we never declared the data type of A. So it's implicitly, right? It's implicitly being a string first, right? Because the value that's coming on the right-hand side is a string. So by definition, implicitly A is being declared as a string. But notice that your A was a string at first, but then we were assigning it an integer. So now we're changing its data type from a string, right, back to some number data type. So those are two primitive data types of JavaScript: number, which includes integers and floating point, and then strings. That's another data type. And we saw earlier, we saw date, right? So those are three primitive data types that are supported by JavaScript. Anyway, so A is now an integer, B is now an integer. Now this plus is indeed going to be a arithmetic addition, right? So let's do that again. Let's refresh. And so that's be 12 and 23, and it becomes 35 as we were expecting. Make sense? Right? All right, let's keep going. Yeah, so this is the code that we just wrote. All right, so right now we just talked about a couple of primitive data types. We said number, and we saw strings, we saw dates. We also saw arrays, right? Arrays allow you to group together multiple variables or multiple values into one single data type, right? We also have, so we call arrays kind of like a compound data type, right? That it can have any number of values of different data types, as a conglomeration of a set of values. We also have another type of complex data type, which is the object. Okay, so JavaScript supports objects without the need of classes. So object as a literal data type, right? That uses the curly brackets, to define, these collection of values, that where you can name each value. So for instance, in here, we're declaring an object. We're calling it house. And we know it's an object because it's an opening and closing curly bracket. And then you can have several properties, right, or attributes inside of that object, right? So we have here rooms. So the house has 3 rooms, it has 3 baths, and the square feet is 1,300 square feet. Okay. Now here the data types are all integers, but you can actually mix and match, right? You can have maybe a name attribute there, so the house has a name, or has an address, so it could be a string as an address. Yes. You could have dates, the date of construction, right? And it can have Boolean, right? It can have you can have nested objects, so you can have objects that contain other objects, right? That can have arrays in there, right? So you can mix and match all sorts of things into an object, right? Objects can contain other objects, arrays of objects of arrays, right? Of any primitive data type. And the notation is called the JavaScript object notation, or JSON for short. Okay. All right. We're going to be playing around with JSON a lot this semester, right? You're going to be hearing JSON over and over and over through, from now on till the end of the semester, right? Lots and lots of JSON. So once you have an object such as a house, let's declare that. Let's copy that, and let's maybe bring it and declare it up here. Okay. Once you have that, you can use what is called the dot notation. So the dot notation allows you to break up or use the attributes of objects, right, individually. So for instance, you can render the rooms, right, by saying house.room or house.baths or house.square feet. So here's an example of creating a small little template here where we're going to render different different attributes of the house, right? Rooms, baths, and square feet. And so, for instance, what we could do is grab the elements of the room and then change its inner HTML and set it to the number of rooms, right? So, for instance, if I refresh, there's our house up here. Right now, it has no values, right? But if we copy the code, this over here, right, we can right, in our JavaScript, after we have the JSON object, right, we're going to grab the rooms ID, this one, right, this li, and we're going to put in there, in the HTML, we're going to put house.rooms, right? In the baths, this ID baths, this one, ID bath, we're going to set the inner HTML to be the house.baths, okay? What is the difference between inner HTML and inner text? Yeah, so again, if you're going to, if you know that the data that you're going to inject is pure text, right? Then you should be using a text, right? So what happens is that there are nodes, these nodes here, right? And right, where you have these nodes here, okay? You can have content in the body like this here. So the content here inside of this H1 can be plain text, or it can be HTML, right? And so the body of an element doesn't really care if it's HTML that you're going to put in there or text, right? It could be text that contains HTML, and the browser just will do the right thing, right? Whether you provided inner HTML or you use text. If you're talking about modifying the body of an element, okay? But there are things that are only text and cannot be HTML. For instance, this ID, right? This ID contains only text, right? You could not embed here HTML, right? You could put here only text, only numbers or text or things like that, but you cannot put it like an object, or you cannot put HTML. So certain portions of the document or elements, you can either case you can use inner text or inner HTML, right? Especially if it's a body, right? But if it's an ID or the value of an input field, right, that can only be text, right? You cannot inject HTML. All right, so for things that can only possibly take text, you should use inner text. If you know that something that can, like the body, can take either one, you can use either one. Okay. So yeah, so if I go back and refresh, notice that indeed we have dynamically rendered right into each one of these items, right, the values of the rooms, the baths, and the square feet. Okay. Strict. So JavaScript is, as you've seen, JavaScript can be very lenient. We were able to assign strings to things that used to be numbers, or numbers to things that used to be strings. And also, as we'll see a little later, in the if statements, when you have a predicate, that predicate can be very loose or very forgiving. For instance, if you have an if where you have a number 1 compared to a character 1, the if statement will say, oh yeah, that number 1 is very similar to this character 1, and it will evaluate to a true, right? And everything's okay, right? But oftentimes we want a little bit more rigorous, right? And for instance, make sure that, hey, if you're comparing something, you might want to make sure that at least the 2 parameters are the same data type, right? That you're not comparing numbers with strings, right? You should maybe flag an error. Okay. Well, to make JavaScript less forgiving and maybe more strict, so that these types of errors are flagged early and then don't introduce any bugs, right? The language introduced this this use strict quotes that you can add at the top of your JavaScript script, right? And the browser will read it, and the browser will say, ah, you want me to be strict about this? Okay. And then it'll start flagging errors all over the place, right? And say, oh, no, you can't do that. No, you can't do that. I'm being very strict, right? And the way you use it is that in the code, you just put the string at the top of your script, right? And now the browser is going to start complaining, right? All sorts of things, right? Let's see if there's anything that's going to complain. There it is. So we do have a couple things that it is complaining about. Console, right? So for instance, inner text and HTML on click and app plus is not defined, right? Because I was using functions before they were declared, right? The browser before was being very lenient and says, okay, well, fine. Here's a function. I don't know it yet, but it'll declare later, right? That's that could be a problem, right? That you're using a function that hasn't been declared yet, right? So now it's being strict, and now it's complaining about it, right? It's throwing all sorts of errors, right? Anyway, it's a good idea to always have use strict. Although when we get into ES6 and when we get into React.js, there's no real reason to use it anymore. Only in legacy code that are still using ES5 and these old style functions, right? That's still a good idea to use strict, but we're not going to linger there too long. We're going to strictly follow the new standard ES6, so we won't use we won't need use strict. Okay. So IIFEs or IFE expressions, or also immediately invoked function expressions. This is a design pattern that dealt with the issue that JavaScript is, the old style JavaScript ES5 did not support modules, right? Any script that you loaded using the script tag, dumped all its variables and all its functions in a global space, right? And this is a problem when you have later scripts overriding maybe any variables or functions that were declared in earlier scripts, right? And so you can have these name collisions when everything's global. And from software engineering, we know that it's a bad practice to use global variables. Well, JavaScript, fully was all global, and so it made it a nightmare to maintain code when you had one single namespace. So there were a couple of hacks were invented and became the best practice in the industry of how to deal with this issue of global namespaces, right? So one of the popular design patterns of how to deal with this was to use functions, right? So functions have the feature that anything that you declare in the function has its own local global space, own local space, right? Or the variables that are declared in a function only live inside of that function. They can't be accessed from outside of the function, right? So they have a local space. That's perfect. That's exactly what we want. We don't want to litter the namespace, the global namespace. We want to keep everything inside of a function, right? So people started using this feature that you had this kind of function where you declare all your programs inside of that one function. But the problem is that you needed to run the function. Somebody had to execute the function, right? And executing that function, it kind of like expose the calling of that function name. You had to name the function something so you can invoke it. But then you would be breaking the rule of declaring something in the global space if you gave the function a name, right? So what people thought of as saying, okay, well, actually JavaScript supports anonymous functions that don't have a name, and you can also JavaScript is very dynamic, right? So for instance, you can declare a function which is anonymous, and then you can put the parentheses right after it, and that's an invocation. That's a function invocation operator, right? Which applies to the left-hand side, right? So this says invoke the function to the left, right? That otherwise could not be invoked because it doesn't have a name, right? The only way to invoke a function typically is by calling it by name, but you don't want a name because you don't want to litter the namespace, right? So this became very, very popular, and the idea would be that you would wrap your entire code, inside of a function, right? So you would do something like this. You would grab this. So now these variables that we don't want them to live in global space, we can just just wrap the whole thing in this iffy expression. And now all these variables that used to be in global space, now they're no longer in global space. They only ever exist inside of this function, right? So if I rerun this, we basically have the same effect, right? It works just like before, right? But it's now not littering the namespace like it was before. Make sense? Now with the new version of JavaScript ES6 that does support modules and importing and exporting modules, you don't have that problem anymore, right? There is no global space, right? You have one script that imports and exports different content, right, on demand, right, without littering the namespace. So this is a kind of like a legacy. This is a legacy technique, right? That is still widely used. You'll see it used quite often in industry because you still have ES5, lots and lots of ES5 code out there, and so you'll find this technique being used quite a bit, especially in older code. Today with React.js and Angular and all these new libraries that are TypeScript and whatnot, which support import, right? You won't see this in those types of applications. Okay. All right. So let's keep going. All right. So here's an example of creating a to-do list using plain old JavaScript. I'm not going to go through this. Try it out, play around with it. Let's go on. So let's take a look at ES6. So ES6 is the new version of JavaScript. I mean, there's even newer versions, right? But the language made a huge shift at ES6, right? There's even newer versions, but the bulk of tremendous advances in the language started at ES6, right? And in general, all the new features are referred to as ES6 features, right? So let's take a look at some of the new features. One of them is how variables now work, right? So it used to be that declaring a variable in JavaScript, you only just had the keyword var, okay? And so today we discourage you in the new version of JavaScript ES6, we discourage you from using var. Instead, you should use either let or const. For let means this is a variable that's going to change over time, and you can change the value anytime you want. But you have to first declare it, and then you can change its value, right? As opposed to before in var, right? You can use the variable without declaring it, right? And then you can declare it later, right? So today that's considered a very bad practice, right? And so instead you should always use let. Right? And const, it declares a constant, meaning something that is declared. The value is taken only a declaration, but then you can't change it ever again, right? It's a constant. So always use let and const. Stop using var if you were using it before. Other things. Just again, to just go over real quick on the JSON or JavaScript object notation, right? Where you can declare a variable and as using curly brackets that can contain other objects, right? So here's an object property, right? So this is an object that contains another object, and that object contains another object, right? Or contains a property that's an array. This is just to show you that basically it can be something fairly complex, right? So let's play around with that a little bit. So here, if we call this maybe another, I call it ES6 maybe. Okay, and let's create an index file here. We'll call it es6.js, and we're just going to import it from here. We'll say I'll import it down here. We'll say script and say source. I'll bring in ES6. There it is. There. Okay, perfect. So yeah, let's inside of ES6, we're going to grab this and declare and run it here. Right. And so if we print it out, if we run this, let's run this. We're going to inspect and let's look at the console. There it is, 543, right? As you would expect. Perfect. Right. So basically it's taking some object, taking the array, property 2, right? And it's grabbing that value right there. Okay. Nothing major there, right? It's just plain old JSON. Also a couple of differences in how you used to do things using ES5, right? The old JavaScript and the new JavaScript. So before, right, you would have to declare all your variables here. For instance, when you're going to iterate, right, you have I, X, and A. But now you can declare variables locally. For instance, you can declare now I that will only exist for within the for loop, and then after the loop, the I won't exist anymore, as opposed to here where I will exist even after the for loop. So you can declare local variables now, right? And not that. Let's look at functions. So functions also had a major leap forward. Okay, so the old style is that you use the keyword function, right? And you say, add ES5, blah blah blah. The new style, right, is that you instead declare a constant, right, and call it add6. And the syntax is that you assign to that constant, you assign a function expression on the right hand side, right? And that function expression now is the parentheses, right, that declares the parameter list. Then the arrow, so we call these arrow functions, right? And then the body, right? Other than that, they look pretty much the same, right? So, but actually, it goes much beyond this, right? This is going to allow us to create functions that are very compact, right? Very terse, which were not available before, right? And you'll see in a minute, right? So again, the major thing here is that we're dropping the keyword function, right? And that we are instead declaring. So instead of function, basically we have an equal and an arrow. Basically, that's syntactically, that's the difference, right? But we'll see that this new syntax is going to allow us to write really tight code, right? We'll see in a minute. All right, so here's the first example on how tight ES6 can be. So here's a function that adds A and B, right? It has a return A plus B, right? And I mean, there's no easier way to write this, right? That you just return A plus B. Well, with the new syntax, you can be even more terse, right? Much more compact. And here it is. You have add ES6, right? You have AB, which has the same parameters, and then you have an arrow, and then notice that this is basically says that the left-hand side evaluates to whatever A plus B is, right? So if you call this, the result is adding A plus B. See that? So this is much more terse, much more compact. Now you can only do this if you have a simple return, right? And indeed we do have here, right? The only line of code in this function is this return, right? It's immediately returning. You're not calculating anything, or you're doing a loop, or you're doing some intermediate calculations, and then you're coming up with the result. Instead you're indeed calculating everything in that return, and boom, it's done, right? So if you have that case, right, you don't even need the curly brackets. You don't need the curly brackets. You can just say, okay, the evaluates to A plus B. Okay, much easier to read. All right, let's keep going. So here's another example. Here's another example of being very terse. So again, this return b times b. Well, you don't need the curly brackets. You don't need the return. We call this an implicit return syntax, right? The return here is implicit, right? Here you are explicitly returning b times b. Here the return is implicit. Okay, you can still put it in, right? But then you would need the curly brackets, right? So you're going back to the old syntax, right? And so this is preferable. This syntax is preferable. It's easier to read. Now also here in this case, right? Before we had two arguments, two parameters to the function. If you have two or more parameters, then the parentheses is required. You have to have parentheses around the parameters. But if you have just one parameter, say you only had A or you only had B, well, in that case, parentheses is not required, right? So here's an example, right? We are squaring the value of B, right, to be B times B. So here B, right, doesn't require the parentheses, right? Now this is easier to read, although it's in most cases, right, it is preferable to put the parentheses there, even if you don't need them, right? Especially in this case like that. Now, if you're using an anonymous function, we'll see in a minute, we'll see where dropping the parentheses is actually makes them easier to read. In the function declaration, like here, it's best practice to put the parentheses, right? But if you're using an anonymous function, as we'll see in a minute, then it's preferably to not put the parentheses, right? We'll see in a minute why. Okay. Yeah, here it is. Here's an example, right? So here we have the another feature of the new ES6 syntax is the way it understands the keyword this, right? The keyword this in JavaScript is fairly contentious, right? It's a weird behavior, right? It doesn't behave or it doesn't have the same meaning as it has in other languages like C# or Java or any other language, right? In those languages, the keyword this has always the same meaning, right? When you instantiate an object, right, from a class, when you say new class, whatever, right, the keyword this always means, right, that it's a reference to the current object, right, that you're in, the current instance, right? Not so in JavaScript. That's not what JavaScript means by this. This, right, means it's going to be tied or reference the innermost context, right? So in this key for instance, if you have a this here, right, it's within the context of the function, okay, and so not the original intent, which might be, this function might live inside of another object, and you would expect that this is referencing the object, not the function, okay? So this this shift in meaning of the keyword this in JavaScript, has made it very, very hard to understand sometimes old JavaScript code. In the new ES6 version, right, this now means the same thing everywhere. It always means that it's referring to the outer context of the object, right? The instance of the object, right? If it's a class or whatnot, right? No, it's not meaning different things in different places, right? So very, very welcome to that that change is hugely welcome. All right, so let's keep going. If functions, you can declare default values of the parameters, right? So the parameters, you can have parameter x, y, and z. Here we are declaring a default value of y and a default value of z, so that if you do not provide the values of y and z, then they will take this default value. So for instance, here I'm calling the function with value 1, so x gets the value of 1, but I'm not providing the values of y and z, so they get the default value of 7 and 42. Okay, that's very good. Arrays, let's take a look at arrays. Arrays, you can declare them the same way you declared them earlier, right? But you get all these new functions that are available now in JavaScript that allows you to very quickly operate on arrays, right? Let's look at some of the easy ones, right? So let's take a look at filter. So filter, like the name suggests, what's going to do is that it's going to go over all the elements of an array, right? And it's going to apply a function on each one of them, right? Now, if that function returns true, you're going to keep the element. If it returns false, you're going to skip over that element, right? Basically, it's filtering, right? You have to give it a predicate. You have to give it a value that returns true or false. Okay. And again, if that returns true, you're going to keep that element. Otherwise, no. So filter calculates another array. So it takes an array and it returns a new array, right? And that new array will contain a subset of the original array, right? And the criteria you provided as a function. So this is a function. There's a function right there. Okay. Notice the arrow. See the arrow? All right. So the left-hand side of the arrow is the parameter, and the right-hand side of the arrow is the body of the function. Okay. So guess what? On the right-hand side, what is that? That's an implied return, right? Meaning the return of this function is that it's going to do the modules 2, and if it's 0, it'll return true. See that? So yeah, that's an implicit return. So filter is it's what it's going to do is that you pass it a function. That's the whole function right there. It's an anonymous function. It's a function that doesn't have a name. Okay, meaning you're just declaring it in there. And here is where right, that's a single parameter, right? Because it's a single parameter, the parentheses are optional, right? I can put the parentheses or I might not put the parentheses. But here, right, because it's embedded, right, inside of a bigger function, right, it's actually easier to read without the parentheses. Like over here, see that? No parentheses. Okay, so these are equivalent. So I would say here I would do a return. Okay, like that. See that? So this function is the same as this function. Well, other than this is equal to 0 and this is not equal to 0. But other than that, syntactically, they're the same, right? It has a parameter I, there it is, and it has a body that returns, right, some modulus operation. Okay, but notice how much easier to read this is than this one. Okay, this is much more verbose, right? And you have to parse this more. You understand? So that's the great thing about. And if you're using the old syntax, say you're using ES5, right? That's even worse. You would have something like function, right? And then no arrow. You have something like that, right? So it doesn't even fit. All right, it doesn't even fit. So yeah, and so I'm just gonna strike that. Strike that, not to use that syntax. Okay. Yeah, don't use that syntax. Yeah, so the way filter works is that it takes an array, it goes over that array, and then passes each element to a function where you're supposed to return true or false, right? So this one is looking at all these values, it's filtering and says, okay, if the modulus 2 is equal to 0, meaning it's divisible by 2, meaning it's even, you return the element that is divisible by 2. Right, so this filter is going to return only the 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. Right now, if it's not divisible by 2, then it's not even, so it must be odd. Right, so this returns all the odd numbers, so 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. Okay, makes sense. So that's filter. Here's another example. Oh, actually, yeah, no, oh, look at that. I have the old way of doing it using ES5, right? So yeah, so let me take that away. We don't need that. It's documented in the later one, in the later slide. There we go. Okay. Okay, so yeah, so here's filter. And using implicit return, right? This is using implicit return. Now if you have other lines, like for instance, we have a console here, then you can't use the implicit return, right? Because you have 2 lines of code, right? If you only had this return, right, then yes, you can remove the return in the curly brackets. But because we have a console in there, now it's not just 1 line of code. Now you need the curly brackets, right? And you need the return. You need the explicit return, right? So you got to be careful. So oftentimes it's a good practice to, even though you don't need the return, just put it in there, right? Sometimes it's convenient so that you can easily put in another line of code in there. Maybe you can put a breakpoint, right? Notice if you don't have a return, you're not even going to be able to put a breakpoint in there, right? So for debugging, it might be inconvenient, right? Okay, so then we have map, right, which we talked about briefly in the earlier example. That basically takes an array, right? It iterates over all the elements in the array, and then you can give it a function, right? And that function, what it'll do is that it will apply that function to every single element, right? And it will return a new array, and that new array is the result of having applied that same function, right, to every single element, right, in the original array. Okay, so for instance, if the original array has 1, 2, 3, 4, okay, I can take each one of them. So I can take 1, right? I can evaluate it and multiply 1 times 1. So the first element of the new array will be 1 times 1, right? The second element will be 2, so that'd be 2, and it would be 2 times 2, so 2 squared, so it'll be 4, right? And then I can pass 3, right? And that'll be 3 times 3, so that's 9, 3 squared, so it'll be 9. And then 4, there'll be 4, it'll be 16. Makes sense? So the new array square will be the result of having applied the function, right, to every single element in the array. Make sense? Okay. And that function map, we're going to use it a lot this semester, right? Every class, you'll see me use map backwards and forwards everywhere. Okay. We're also going to use find a lot. We'll use filter quite a bit as well, right? So find does what it says, right? It iterates over the array and returns the element that matches the criteria. Find index finds the element, but it returns where it found it, what index, right? So greater than 3, it'll the first one that is greater than 3, which is 4. So that's position number 2, 0, 1, 2, right? So returns 2. Okay. And finally, filter returns an array of a subset of the arrays that meet that criteria. Okay. String interpolation, right? So remember what we used earlier, the backticks. Those backticks, right? We call them templates, right? Or sometimes we also call them string literals, right? And so it allows you to embed expressions inside of that string. So for instance, if you have, say you have this object customer and card, and this message is in, notice the opening tick here and the closing tick right there. See that? So this big long string is embedding, right, the hard-coded hello, and then the customer.name, so Alice. So hello, Alice, right? Want to buy, and then card amount. Card amount is card.amount, that's 7. So want to buy 7, right? Card product, so card product bar, right? So want to buy 7 card, or 7 bar for a total of, right? And notice here's an expression, right, where we are multiplying the amount 7 times unit price 42, right? So we're multiplying 7 times 42. So this evaluates to 7 times 42 bucks, right? And we turn on the message. Okay. Yeah, so very, very powerful strings. We're going to be using them quite a lot. Let's talk about destructing. So destructing means that you can have a structure like an array or an object, right? And then you can access elements within those structures, right? By some really cool syntax, right? That allows you to extract elements from there. So for instance, say you have a list of just 1, 2, 3, right? And you want to retrieve values for A and B, which is the first element and the third element, right? So that's easy, right? You just say A list sub 0 and B list sub 2, right? Well, in the new syntax, actually, it's much easier. You can say you can take the list on the right-hand side and you can assign it to a square brackets on the left side, right? So arrays on the right-hand side construct the array, right? But arrays on the left side deconstructs the array, right? This says grab the array that you declared earlier, deconstruct it, right, and extract, right, the first element and the third element, right, from that array. So A gets 1 and B gets 3. See that, right? As opposed to using, you know, individual indices. Okay. So yeah, this syntax is very, very powerful. Another thing that allows you to do is, for instance, before, if you needed to swap values, right, you would have to say, okay, well, I'm going to put A instead of temp, right? Then B is in A, and then swap B equal temp, right? That's a very common thing. If you want to swap values between A and B, you need a temporary variable. Now you don't need to do that, right? You can use this deconstructing, right, where you can build an array on the right-hand side with AB, right, and then assign it to BA, right, and the swap happens there, right? So much nicer, this new syntax. Well, you can use that with objects. You could with arrays, but you can also use it also with objects, right? So, for instance, if you have an object that has, you know, attributes A, B, C, and D here, right? To retrieve individual elements, you use dot notation. Well, today now the syntax is much more terse, right, and much easier to read. You can just assign the temp on the right-hand side, and now curly brackets, which normally are only on the right-hand side to construct the data, you can now use curly brackets on the left side to deconstruct the data. See that? So you can have the temp on the right-hand side and then extract A and C, right? So this gets the A, which is 1, 2, 3. So A gets 1, 2, 3, and then C gets 3, 4, 5, right? So it assigns it to the left-hand side. Very, very powerful. We're going to use this a lot this semester. You know, everywhere it's used. You know, especially in React.js and all these newer libraries. This is a very, you know, it's your bread and butter. You know, many times. So here's just an example of calling a function with an object, right? Bar and value 42. So arg takes those values, and you can deconstruct each value by using the dot notation. This is the old way of doing it. With the new way of doing it, right? You have the same function, but right when you pass it, now you can use curly brackets and the parameter. So basically, it's deconstructing, it's extracting the values of name and value, right? These over here is extracting and then assigning it to these variables as part of the parameters, right? So the same thing we did here, right? It's this, right? We are taking an object that is built and then deconstructing and extracting pieces of that object that we need, right? So yeah, same thing here. So we're passing this object, we're deconstructing it and assigning it to local variables. See that? Much better, easier to read this. One of the benefits is that now the order of the parameters doesn't matter because you only really have one parameter. The object parameter is the only single parameter, but internally you have these variables, name and value, that it doesn't really matter which order you put them in, right? As opposed to regular functions where you have parameters that have to be passed in a particular order. No longer you need to do that because with this syntax now, you can just work with one single parameter, and the deconstructor, you know, allows you to put them in any order. It doesn't matter, right? You can put a name val or val name. The name is what matters, right? Right, not the position. Okay, very powerful. So if internally you want to rename the parameters to something else, internally you need, you know, n and v. You can use the colon notation to rename the parameters that are being passed in as an argument. You can rename them to local variables, you know, here n and v, right? So not only can you deconstruct using objects, but you can also deconstruct using arrays, right? If you pass an array, right, you can extract the first element, the second element, right? So name would get bar and val would get 42. Over here, obviously the order does matter, right? Because arrays have things in a particular order that is being passed in, you know, the first, the second, the third element. So these do matter, right? As opposed to objects, the order does not matter. Some shorthand notation, again, making it more compact, the language. If you are building an object in terms of attributes and values, if the attributes and the value are using the same exact symbol, XX, right, or YY, right, where you're having a attribute called X whose value is X, and attribute called Y whose value is Y. Now the new syntax allows you to be much more terse, right, and use a shorthand of just X comma Y, right, which is understood is expanded to be X colon X and Y colon Y, right? So they're equivalent. Again, we're going to use that a lot, right? Modules. Modules now, right, as you remember, I had mentioned earlier that we use IFE expression, the IIFE, the immediately invoked functional expressions, because the old JavaScript language did not support modules, didn't support local namespaces, exporting namespaces, and importing. That was not supported, right? But now they're fully supported. Now you can declare maybe in a library, right, in a math library, you can declare all sorts of functions, right? That these are not global anymore, right? They only have file scope, right? They're not, when you do a script and you load math.js, right? They're not going to litter the namespace, right? So to be able for someone else to be able to view what's inside, right, of that file, you would have to explicitly export it. You have to say, okay, well, I might have hundreds of functions here. I might want to export just these 10, right? And so you can explicitly export what you want. But then someone else, if they want to use whatever's declared in there, whatever you exported, they would have to explicitly import either import the entire library, right? Like this, from lib math, right? Everything, I'm importing everything, and locally I'm calling it math, and then I can use math.sum, math.whatever, math.py, right? Now it's very very explicit what the dependencies are between the files. Before, there was no such thing in old JavaScript, right? In new JavaScript, it's very clear that some app.js, directly depends on the library math, right? Or instead of importing the entire library, you can import only the few things that you need, right? Again, using the deconstruct syntax, right? That where this is importing from lib, right? And all of these, sum and pi, but then you can explicitly determine what it is that you want to import. Very, very powerful. We're going to be using that a lot. Okay. Here are some more examples of importing lib and math and exporting some few things, right? And declaring where we can then import them from other applications. Okay. Classes. Classes, now we have full support of classes, unlike ES5, right? You can before there was kind of like a weird support of classes where you have actual functions that could play as classes. Not anymore. Now you have full support of actual classes, very much like other languages, right? You can do a class and declare a class, and then you can have functions or methods that are part of that class, right? You can have a constructor, right, with the keyword constructor, not the same name of the shape, but the actual keyword constructor that is invoked every time when you do a new on that class, right? When you're instantiating and you're passing arguments to instantiate it, you can declare local variables, right, using the keyword this. Now the meaning of this does only mean the local instance that you have instantiated. You can declare local functions, right, like move and whatnot, which use the current instance, right? You can also extend shapes, right? You have full-blown inheritance, right, where you have top-level base classes declaring functions that other classes can inherit from, right? And then they can either override, overload, right, or use the super versions of their parents, right? So here we are, the constructor can call a super constructor that might have been declared by shape, right? And then declare new attributes that are specific to the rectangle with width and height, but then use the constructor of the shape, which was only X and Y. Circle, same thing, right? Can extend shape and declare its own attribute radius. That would be a local parameter, right? You also have a declaration of the visibility of functions in here, right? That you can create setters and getters. Very much like any other language, right? Especially Java, C#, where you can have set widths, height, get width, and whatnot. But the way you declare it is by adding the keyword set and get, which allows you to treat the attributes, treat the functions as if it were just attributes as opposed to functions, right? So this area equal reads, it calls the area, it's a getter, it calls the area function, it evaluates that, and then you can compare it against something, right? New, right, is the syntax for instantiating new instances, okay? So you have also overloading, right, or overriding, where you might have a function that is declared at the top level that can then be overloaded by inherited classes that can then reuse the super version, right, of their parent class, right? So everything you would expect in a full-blown programming language, fully object-oriented now, which was not quite object-oriented in the previous version. Okay, so anyway, we're going to be using JavaScript a lot this semester. For the remainder of the semester, we're going to be sticking to ES6. All right. All right. Let's see. That's all I had for you today. Any questions? Oh, was I supposed to go over A5? Actually, it's going to be due next Thursday, right? So you can start working on A5. I'll go over it in class on Thursday, so you'll still have a week to complete. But you're welcome to start working on it. It's the new one is about working with JavaScript, so it has lots of examples on working with JavaScript. So you can start working on the practice of creating your embedding JavaScript and loading it, right, and writing to the console, right, some alerts, right, and declaring variables in the global space, different data types like Boolean, strings, and whatnot, conditionals, if else. So yeah, so get started on the assignment. It's not due on a week from Thursday, but I would, if you're done with the previous assignment, I would get started playing around with this now. Okay. All right. Any questions?
Hello, I need a clarification for A4 challenge part. You
Sure.
showed an example picture for, I think, the entertainment. Do we need to do the entertainment tab, or we still do for you?
Let's see. So A4
challenge.
for the challenge part.
Yeah, the example you showed is the entertainment tab.
Challenge. Let's see. So the challenge was Bootstrap challenge. For the challenge part section, restyle explore.html web page to look more like the actual Twitter version of the Explore screen. Okay. Implement style, blah, 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 blah. The resulting screen doesn't have to look exactly like the real Explore screen. The following is a list, blah, 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 blah. Use the screen capture below as a guide of what the resulting screen should look like. Okay. So what is the question?
Yeah, you show a capture of the screenshot of the entertainment tab. I mean, do we
Yeah, no, it doesn't matter.
The entertainment tab? Okay.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
great.
it doesn't matter which one's highlighted. Yeah, you can highlight just the for you.
Okay. And
Okay.
a follow-up on the ES6. I know we are focused on ES6 for this course. So is it important to get familiar with ES5 syntax for the course and for the real development?
No, we're gonna be doing exclusively ES6. I mean, there might be cases in particular when we use older libraries or maybe a jQuery that might expect ES5. And so we might briefly use ES5 just only for jQuery purposes, but for the most part, no.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, I have a question on A4.
Yeah, sure.
So for the explorer.html, are we gonna use the file from last assignment?
Yeah, so somebody was asking this on Piazza. So aren't we copying the old content from A3 and then making a brand new A4? I mean, in the new version of the A4, you should be able to just, just blow away the content and replace it with the new content.
All right. So we're gonna delete the CSS like we wrote before, right?
It's up to you. You can reuse it if you need it, right?
And I still have one specific question on the A4. Can I share my screen?
Let me see, just a second.
Professor, can I take quiz before?
Oh, right. Let me set that up. Just a second. Where is the? Huh. I don't see my control. Oh, there it is. Just a second. Okay, so wait a minute. So can you text me the name of the student who needs to start the quiz? Juno Park. Okay.
Yes, I put in the chat.
Okay, got it. All right, so whoever wants to share the screen, I think you can share it now.
All right. Okay. So can you see it?
Yes, I can.
All right. So far I have this one. So when I shrink the screen to the large size, it gets to there. So like I'm trying to figure out how to like display as the documents as like there's like some overlay, some kind of thing.
Right. So I mean, there's a couple of things you could do. You can make the overall width of the who to follow a little bigger, maybe give it an additional column. So that and
Yeah,
maybe
I tried those, but it won't work as the picture shown.
is this 100%?
You mean the follow?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's 100%. Let me.
Well, no, I mean the window, is it 100%?
No, it's not 100%. Like
Yeah, so
here
can
is
you do
100%.
can you do control? No, I mean, can you do control plus and minus? I just want to see if you're zooming in or not. Do control plus, minus, the minus. Okay,
Yeah, that
okay. All right, that is
100%.
100%. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what I did to make it that way. I think what I did is I made the left-hand side where the icons is smaller, and then I gave it an extra column. Or maybe I even made the main content smaller and gave it an extra column. Maybe that's what I did. I don't know. So you're saying that doesn't work for you?
Yeah, because I've checked the let me see, let me pull out the assignment. Because like the layout is like kind of weird to me because it doesn't fit for the container mode.
Oh, maybe I can answer this question. Hello.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you can use a container.
Yeah, I used container, but
you use container.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, what did I do? Let me see if I can
Like
pull it up.
if you see what's in the instruction, like it's like kind of like a overlay over there. I don't think container allows this action.
Oh, I don't have it here. It's in my other laptop. Yeah, I don't have it. But yeah, no, I was able to do it. But I mean, I'm not. We're not gonna. You're not gonna lose points for that, right?
Oh.
Of just wrapping around. That's fine. That looks. Yours looks
so
very good.
that's fine for wait.
Yeah,
so
yeah, that's
that
very
looks
good.
fine. So
Yeah,
if
that looks.
even if the line like goes to even
Yeah,
if
no,
the part of the name
looks awesome.
all right.
Yeah.
So I guess I'll just leave it like this. And for the icon
Or you know
thing,
what I might have done too is I might have said wrapping, no wrap. So if you do, can you right click on the relativity space? Can you right click and inspect it?
yeah, sure.
Maybe you want to put the inspector at the bottom.
Oh.
So the dot 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 on the
yeah.
right, oh, the dot 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 on the right.
Okay.
So at the bottom.
Oh, okay.
So right click on the relativity space. Right click on it on the relativity space.
I can't do that.
Why not? Put your mouse over the relativity space.
Right?
right above it and say inspect.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you move that down? Where is it? Which one is it? Go down. No, next one. Next one down. Next one down. Down further. Down right there. Open that up.
Okay.
Okay. Where's the relativity space? That's not it. The second one. Go down one more. No, not that one. Next one. That one. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how about, can you, yeah. Okay, so maybe that, can you do that div? Click on the div.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so now on the element style on the right hand side, can you type no, on the element style? No. See, it says element dot style. Right there. Click.
Yeah, that one.
Click. Yeah. Put white. Yeah, white space tab. No wrap. No wrap. There it is. See, it's the third element. Okay, try now. Oh, no, wait, no, maybe not the div.
Okay.
Maybe not the
So
div.
maybe it's
Maybe the yeah, uncheck that. Yeah, uncheck it. Yeah. So maybe the
it's maybe
span. Do it on the
this one.
span, maybe.
Okay, so it's
So white space, no wrap. No wrap. Try that. Now make it smaller. See if it works.
okay. Oh, I think that might works. So that's what you did.
Yeah. Oh, okay. See, it's not wrapping.
Oh, okay.
So probably that's what I did. I don't know. I don't remember.
But is that fine for the submission? Because
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine. Yeah.
right.
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay. And for the more button, because you said in the piazza we're gonna overlap two icons, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's
But
what I
like,
did. Yeah.
I find it hard to do that, so I just like have a CSS called like
Oh, really?
hover. So, but the thing is, I can't make them. Once I hover the more, it won't turning blue.
That's
Is
weird.
that fine?
No, you should.
I mean,
Yeah, that's
like,
fine. But I mean, you should be able to put both of them in the.
But I use CSS like
Oh,
the icon hover thing to do
really?
the background thing.
I mean, how did you do the check mark on the right hand side, right next to NASA and Tesla? How did you do the check mark?
Icon?
Oh, that's not a stack.
No, it's not stack. Just direct icon. Like just
yeah.
one icon.
Okay. Yeah, no, I
used
used stack and it worked fine. It's fine. Yeah, that's okay.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's all I have.
Cool.
Yeah. Thank you.
Beautiful. Looks awesome. All right, next.
Hi, Professor.
Hi,
I have
what's
a
up?
question about assignment 4. So for maybe if I share my screen, I'm struggling to put like the caption on this image.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah. So if you, yeah, can I take control? Maybe let's see, guys. Wait a minute. Stop. Request control. Oh yeah, system
okay,
preferences. Need to give me permission. So select zoom. Scroll down. Isn't there zoom or something?
I don't. Oh, I think.
Oh, maybe. Oh, you have to unlock it first. Yeah. Yeah. Select zoom. Click it. Oh, that's weird. Huh. Oh, maybe you have to select on the left-hand side. It was selected something, you unselected it, so we don't know what it is that you're supposed to give it permission to. Screen recording, I think it was. Screen recording. Click on screen recording. Yeah, now selected. Oh, no, it is selected. Microphone speech. All right, close this. Let me do it again. Give up. Request. Okay, open system preferences. Oh, accessibility. Okay, so unlock it. And now go down, scroll down to Zoom. What the heck? All right, forget it.
Because
I don't know what's going on.
Is it because I'm on Zoom right now? Maybe I don't know.
I don't know. I don't think so. Anyway, I'll walk you through it. Unlock. All right, so bottom left, click on bottom left. Inspect. And okay, so
Yeah, I just had this as text.
okay, where's the image? Is the image above, right above it?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so do one thing. So put on the outer div, that div right there. Yeah, put down below, put position relative. Oh, sorry, yeah, relative, yeah. Position relative, tab relative. Okay, then go to bottom left, the text on the div,
Okay.
Yeah, click on that. And then put position absolute. Okay. So where to go? Okay, maybe you need to bring it forward. Do Z index 1, maybe? Z dash index.
Here.
Yeah, right there, Z dash index. Tab 1. Oh, there it is. Okay, now I can do now do bottom. Yeah, click on the right side bottom. Tab, say, I don't know, 10 pixels maybe. Okay, so now see it's hovering on top of it. See that? And you can move it left, say left 10 maybe. Yeah. So left 10. Okay, there it is. And then you make it bigger. You can say, you know, font size, I don't know, whatever.
Yeah.
And you can make it as big as you want. That makes sense?
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah,
Okay.
I think I did the position absolute, but then the text was just hiding. So I guess Z index brings us.
Yeah, Z index. Yep.
Okay. But is bottom highlighted here, or is it just I have it selected?
That's because you have it, yeah, selected. That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And so also for this icon, so I should overlay it with like the circle icon.
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
All right, good luck.
Thanks.
Professor, I have a question.
Sure, what's up?
Yeah, for the challenge part of assignment 4, so to make it look more like Twitter, can we just directly use the SVG icons which we see on the Twitter page?
Sure.
It looks more better like when we compare it to Font Ocean.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, you could use other things. Sure.
Cool. Thank you.
Hi, Professor.
Yes.
Can I share my screen?
Sure. Go ahead.
Okay. So a question for this icon. Actually, I did
Which one?
some this
Which
icon.
Which icon?
The stack one.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It seems as there's some space between the icon and the text. So
Is that?
yeah.
I mean, is there a padding? Can you right click on it and see on the? Yeah, there it is. Right. That's the span. So go on the span.
Span where?
Yeah. No, above in the DOM. No, not in the style. In the DOM above. Yeah, in the span. See the span?
This one?
Yeah. Okay, click on the span. On the span tag. Do you see it? Span class FA stack.
Okay.
Yeah, right there. Click on that. Relative height, blah, blah. Okay, it looks like there's some size. You see
Some
width? You
size.
say, yeah, see width 2.5 EM.
Yeah.
Yeah, so unclick that. Uncheck it. This is a
How
checkbox
to-
next to it. No, well, no.
Oh,
Yeah, uncheck it. Right, so there you can control the width. Looks like you had some width that was added, and maybe some padding or some. Yeah, so somewhere you're adding that. Can I? Let me see. Can I request control?
yeah. Okay.
Okay. Do you know how to do that?
I'm not sure. Maybe this.
Yeah, click on zoom. Okay, that should work.
Does that work?
Yeah. Let's see. Does it work? I don't know.
In the work.
Is that you controlling or is that me?
It's you, I think.
Really? Let me see.
Yeah.
Let's see. Give me refresh. Why is this so big?
It's too big.
Oh, maybe because I clicked here.
Oh, yeah.
I don't understand why this is so big. Okay, I think there's just a lag. There's a lag, so yeah. So if I click on that, oh my goodness, it's so slow. Yeah, no, it's too slow. All right, you do it. So right click again on
Okay.
that on the dot dot dot. Yeah, right click on it and do inspect. Okay, very good. Yeah, can you click on the more? On the span more? Go a little more down where it says more. Move your mouse down where it says, yeah, there you go. And let's see, is there some kind of padding around this? Let's see, inline block, min width. Can you go down and scroll down for the style? See if there's anything in the style that is screwing it up. Go down, go down. Let's see, gutter. Ooh, gutter 1.5. Okay, go down all the way down, all the way down.
Oh, this.
All the way down. Okay, there's a width and height. Okay, so that doesn't look like it's doing much. Okay, so probably that's not the problem. Click on the span right above it. And the right above that. Yeah, that span. Click it. Yeah, that it's the width of that. See that? See it's highlighting on the left-hand side. It's too wide. You have a 40
Yeah.
pixels. It's 40 pixels. So you need to control
Oh.
the width. It's too big. It's 40 pixels.
Okay, so I just changed the width.
Yeah, it'll,
Just
right. Yeah, it's pushing out everything else, right?
okay.
Yep.
Sure. And I have another question about the project.
Yeah.
It seems that there's milestones in the syllabus. It shows that there's maybe sometime in maybe after Thanksgiving there are some milestones we need to submit our projects.
Yeah, yeah. I'll talk more about the project for the whole course for everybody
Okay.
on what the milestones are.
Sure.
Yep.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Because I did not find any date on the schedule part.
Yeah, no, I haven't added them yet. Nope.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
All right, bye.
Hi, Professor. I had a question. Is it possible I could share my screen?
Yes, go ahead, please.
I think you're still sharing. Okay, thank you. Perfect. So my basic question is over here. I'm not sure where this sort of background color is coming from. I tried inspecting it, and then I've also tried setting the entire sort of card header to have the background color none and set that important, but there's still this sort of a color.
That's weird. Okay. Yeah, right click on that. Yeah, right click on that.
Yeah.
All right, can you make this bigger?
Oh, sorry.
Okay, can you zoom in? I mean, the font is so small, I can barely see it. Okay. Yeah, okay, so right click on that again. Okay, so let me look at the UL on the right-hand side. Click on the UL.
Yep.
Yeah, okay. And can you make the styles a little bigger so we can see?
I'm not quite
Okay,
sure.
all right. See background color. Ooh, no.
There you go.
Leave it the way it was. Okay, see the background color dot card. See that below? It has a gray color.
Here.
Yeah, we need to override that. Right now it
I
says
tried.
background.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, so you need to override dot card in yours.
Oh, because I tried setting the entire header to have a sort of background color of none important.
Yeah, I know, but you need to override it. Right now it's background color or something. And
Yeah.
so no, well, so what we're gonna do is that in a separate CSS, do you have like an index.css or something?
Yeah, you could just tell me and then I'll just go ahead and do that later.
Yeah, I know. So in a separate index.css or whatever we're going to call it, you're going to import it, and you'll import it after Bootstrap. Right. So first you're going to import Bootstrap, and then after that you're going to link another CSS of your own, right?
Okay.
And it's going to declare a class called .card. And then in there you're going to set then you're going to set the background color to be something else, either white or whatever.
Okay, cool. And then for this, for sort of like the buttons, I couldn't get it to follow like the same color as the one on the dock. I tried doing like an outline secondary, but the outline is still kind of.
Yeah, I don't think you want an outline. I don't believe there's an outline in the one that I created. Was there? I mean, you follow the outline that you use for who to follow.
Yeah, because these aren't. I didn't use buttons for these. These are card elements or nav items.
Well, on the right hand side, on the who to follow, aren't those? Isn't that a list?
Yeah, these are lists, whereas these are buttons.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. Use lists.
Okay.
Yeah, not buttons.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay.
Professor, I have a really quick question.
Sure, what's up?
So what level of progress should we have making on our final project?
So you should be finding folks to work with, right? 2 or 3 or at most 4. You should coming up with a topic that you want to work on that meets the requirements. I believe we went through the requirements, didn't we?
Yeah, we did.
About a couple of weeks ago.
Yep.
And I think you should be coming up with a wireframe on more or less how you want to lay out the navigation and what pages are you going to have in there. And those wireframes should reflect all the things that you're supposed to be able to do, like search for something, right? And lists some search results and have a details page, right? And this would be for whatever domain you want to work on, whether it's movies or songs or baseball fans or sports or whatever, or food, right? And you might start thinking about, okay, well, my homepage has to display something that it's dynamic, that it's for people that are logged in. What am I going to search for, right? How am I going to display that list, and how am I going to display in the details page what I want to display there, right? And so that's where you should be doing design. The next step would be, okay, where am I going to get all that data? And so I believe I gave you a link to I think it was Programmable Web, that is a directory of APIs that allow you to retrieve data for whatever topic you want. So I would be exploring that as well.
Okay.
That, can I retrieve this data?
Right. Sounds good. Any particular requirements for the wireframe?
Well, no, I don't have I don't believe I have a requirement for wireframes. Is that, as part of software design, right, of UI, you would be creating these. They could be, placeholder HTML documents, right, that kind of get you started on trying out and prototyping what this might look like for yourself. But
Yes.
there are some milestones that I will start going over that suggest what things you should have by when. Yeah, I'll talk about that on Thursday.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Thanks for your time.
All right, sure. Anything else?
Professor, I sent you a note, but I can wait until everyone else asks questions regarding the actual assignment.
Sure. Anyone else?
Yes, Professor, I have a question. It looks like that I'm unable to deploy the homework to server.
Wait, say it again. Deploying on a server. Yeah, no, that. So, I mean, it's not required that you are deploying on the server. We will start deploying on the server next week. Right now, the server might be broken because we've been mucking around with the index screen. So next week, when we start working with React.js, we're going to move all our codes to the source directory, and we are going to be able to redeploy the server. So right now, it's not required to have the server up and running.
But in the homework A2 and A3, at the end of the paragraph, you said that we should to deploy our homework to server, our code.
Well, I mean, every time you commit to Git, you are pushing your source code to Git. It is trying to redeploy, but it might be broken now because we might have we've been doing a lot of our work in our index.html, and that could be broken, right? So it's not a requirement for that server not to be broken, but next week it will be required not to be broken. So we'll fix that.
Okay, but it looks like my teammates, they could deploy their code to server. I'm not really sure why.
Yeah, it's because they might have fixed it, and I will tell you how to fix it next week when we do React.
Okay.
But right now it's not required. So they might have gone ahead and fixed it themselves. It's basically putting back a div that has an ID of root, basically.
Okay.
Basically, that's it.
Thank you, Professor.
Anything else?
Hi, I have a question on the challenge section.
Sure, what's up?
We're using the same files for the build section, right? So it's okay if we delete classes that we used just for the build section that no longer apply to the challenge section?
Right. Now you would be removing it from a copy of the previous assignment, right? So you would have an A4 directory. And in that A4 directory, you can do whatever you want. You would still have the old code in A3, no?
Oh, no, not from A3 to A4. I mean the A4 challenge section on top of the A4 build section.
Right. So what I'm saying is that in the previous one, oh, okay. Yeah, no, yeah, you could totally overwrite that. Sure, of course.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sure.
Hi, Professor.
Sure, what's up?
So just to ask, one more question regarding the challenge section. So the build section that was based on a lighter theme. It was with a white background and everything, but the challenge section it had a screenshot for a black background, a dark theme. So do we need to change the theme or do we keep it as a light theme?
What time is this? A4?
Yes, it's A4. So the build section, we built everything which had a white background, but the challenge section, the screenshot, it showed a black background. So
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I ended up changing everything to the black background. So I just hope that
I could have sworn everything was black all the time. No?
No, the build section, if you check, that's all white, right?
Oh, it is white.
And in the A3 section, we had everything black. So
okay. What I meant to do is to for the exchange. Okay, I did not specify. I had meant to explicitly say to change it to the color, but I didn't. So I will take it either way.
okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Well, the thing is that in A5, I give you a CSS that makes it all dark by just replacing one file. And then it will look like that.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
What else? Anyone else? Anyone else? Laura, Ricky?
Hi, Professor.
Sure. What's up?
Hi, I'm Chintan. So I submitted my challenge link, like I had forgot to put the link in the main index HTML, but I realized it after 3 hours. So I just pushed it, go to the Git later, like how much percentage of marks will be cut for that?
So you updated it.
I just added the link, that's it. Like I forgot to put the link for the challenges part in the main index HTML.
And that's the only thing that you change?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
We can see it in the Git comments. Like,
yeah, so you were late 3 hours, you said, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I just realized it at 3 a.m. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically that would basically that the maximum grade you would get, it would be a 97.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Professor.
Yeah. All right, anything else? Drenung, have a question? All right, if nothing else, then thank you so much. Have a great evening, everybody. Good night.